Imagine a man who can wage war without firing a single shot. A mind so precise it turns chaos into a symphony. Money Heist is not just the story of a robbery. It's the chronicle of an idea. An idea born in silence, nurtured in solitude, and unleashed on the most secure vaults in Spain. 8 strangers, each with nothing to lose, are brought together under city names. Tokyo, Berlin, Nairobi, Rio, Denver, Helsinki, Oslo, and at the center, unseen yet omnipresent, stands the professor. He is no masked thug, no greedy kingpin. He is an architect of rebellion, a conductor orchestrating each move like a grand piece of theater. But every plan, no matter how perfect, bleeds when confronted with love, betrayal, and the unpredictable chaos of human nature. This is a tale of resistance against power, of criminals becoming revolutionaries, of a heist transforming into a national movement. And behind it all is a man whose only real weapon is his mind. Sergio Marquina, better known to the world by his codename, the Professor, is the quiet storm at the heart of Money Heist. His origin is steeped in solitude. As a child, chronic illness kept him in hospital wards rather than classrooms, forcing his world to shrink to the size of his bed and the books piled beside it. Those books became his companions, his escape, and eventually his weapons. History gave him the patterns of human conflict, mathematics taught him precision, politics revealed the mechanics of power, and literature whispered the motives that drive people to defy it. But it was his father, a man with more courage than caution, who lit the match that would burn in Sergio for decades. His father dreamed of a heist to free them from hardship, but a failed attempt ended with his death, leaving young Sergio with grief carved deep into his bones and an obsession with their loyalties, their breaking points. Long before the first mask is worn or the first shot is fired, Sergio invests years studying the psychology of negotiation, the dynamics of hostage situations, and the intricate patterns of law enforcement response. He trains himself to anticipate not just what his opponents might do, but why they would do it. This foresight allows him to manipulate the board like a master strategist, positioning each piece, both allies and adversaries, exactly where he needs them. Recruiting the crew is an act of precision in itself. He accounted for long before the first day of the heist. Yet, it is in these moments of improvisation that his humanity surfaces most vividly. When one of his team is endangered or when public perception begins to tilt against them, his decisions reveal an emotional undercurrent that threatens to undo his carefully maintained detachment. The slow development of his relationship with Raquel marks the beginning of a transformation in him, a shift from an almost clinical detachment toward a more personal stake in the outcome. This evolution complicates his identity as a mastermind. He becomes not only the architect of the operation, but also a participant vulnerable to the same passions and fears that drive the rest of his crew. The professor's moral philosophy stands as a curious pillar within the chaos of his criminal enterprise. He envisions the heist as a bloodless revolution, where the true victory lies in outwitting the state rather than overpowering it. From the outset, he instructs the crew to avoid lethal violence at all costs, not merely to protect the hostages, but to maintain the public sympathy. He knows that the battle is fought on 2 fronts, inside the walls of the Royal Mint or Bank of Spain, and in the court of public opinion. The red jumpsuits and Salvador Dalí masks are not just disguises. They're symbols, visual tools of rebellion that speak to inequality, oppression, and the power of the people against the machinery of the state. By crafting an image of the robbers as principled insurgents rather than common criminals, he turns the media into an unwitting ally, sowing doubt in the narrative presented by law enforcement. Yet this idealistic framework is tested repeatedly when lives hang in the balance. Moments of crisis force him to weigh the survival of his crew against his nonviolent doctrine. His moral restraint becomes a double-edged sword, preserving the humanity of the mission while creating tactical vulnerabilities that ruthless opponents are quick to exploit. Still, the professor clings to this principle, not out of stubborn pride, but because it is the foundation of his vision. That true power is not seized through destruction, but through the precision of a plan that leaves no blood on the floor and forces the system to kneel through intellect alone. One of the professor's most fascinating traits is his ability to maintain emotional control under pressure. Yet this control is not the absence of emotion. It is the disciplined management of it. He approaches tense moments with an almost meditative calm, speaking slowly, choosing words with precision, and allowing silence to become a psychological weapon. Whether negotiating with inspectors, guiding his team through unforeseen crises, or responding to public scrutiny, he projects an aura of composure that inspires confidence in allies and sows uncertainty in opponents. This calm is carefully cultivated. Years of isolation, academic study, and self-imposed discipline have made him a master of emotional compartmentalization. Yet cracks appear as his attachment to the crew and to Raquel deepens. Love, loyalty, and loss begin to infiltrate his decision-making, challenging the clean lines of logic that have always defined him. In these moments, his humanity becomes both his strength and his liability. It humanizes him to those he wishes to lead, but it also introduces variables that pure strategy cannot control. The professor's struggle is not simply against the police or the state. It is against the possibility that emotion will derail the clockwork perfection of his plans. In this tension between mind and heart lies the essence of his character. A man trying to reconcile the precision of a tactician with the unpredictability of a human being who cares deeply, even when caring threatens to destroy everything he has built. The recruitment of the crew stands as one of the professor's most brilliant feats of strategy, revealing his rare talent for matching skill sets with psychological profiles. Each member is chosen not only for their expertise. Tokyo for her quick reflexes and daring, Berlin for his leadership and charisma under fire, Nairobi for her precision in production, Denver for loyalty and unexpected empathy, Helsinki and Oslo for physical strength and quiet resilience, and Rio for technical prowess, but also for their personal vulnerabilities. The professor understands that people commit fully when the mission aligns with their deepest needs, fears, or desires. He provides each recruit not only with a role, but with a reason to believe in the cause, whether that cause is wealth, redemption, or a new identity. This creates a crew bound by more than shared criminal intent. They are a manufactured family, forged in secrecy and united by the promise of transformation. He even dictates rules for personal conduct. No real names, no personal relationships, to preserve operational focus and prevent emotional entanglements. Ironically, these very rules are broken in ways that both strengthen and endanger the mission. The professor's ability to read people allows him to guide them like pieces on a board, anticipating conflicts before they erupt and defusing them with tailored interventions. Yet, the same intimacy that enables him to manipulate also makes him vulnerable to the inevitable bonds that form, forcing him to face the paradox of building trust in an operation where trust, if misplaced, can mean total collapse. Central to the professor's identity is his mastery of narrative control, a weapon as potent as any firearm in the heist. From the moment the Royal Mint siege begins, he wages a parallel war through the media, carefully releasing information that paints the robbers not as self-serving criminals, but as symbols of defiance against systemic corruption. The Salvador Dalí masks and red jumpsuits are not chosen for aesthetics alone. They are deliberate cultural markers designed to evoke the surreal rebellion of art and the unity of workers' movements. This theatricality transforms the heist into a political statement, turning public sentiment into a protective shield. The professor manipulates this sentiment through televised hostage releases, symbolic gestures, and calculated leaks to the press, all while maintaining plausible deniability. By controlling how events are perceived rather than merely how they unfold, he forces the authorities into reactive positions, eroding their credibility and emboldening sympathizers. His understanding of mass psychology enables him to turn ordinary citizens into advocates, transforming a criminal act into a populist cause. This dimension of his strategy blurs the lines between crime and revolution, leaving the audience, and the fictional Spanish public, questioning whether they are witnessing a heist for personal gain or a genuine uprising against entrenched power. The genius here lies in how seamlessly he integrates the operational with the ideological, ensuring that even if the heist fails materially, its message will endure. The professor's relationship with Raquel Murillo, the inspector tasked with bringing him down, serves as a case study in his complex interplay of manipulation and genuine emotion. Initially, he approaches her as a target to be influenced, learning her routines, vulnerabilities, and values so he can subtly guide her responses during negotiations. Disguised as Salva, an unassuming, slightly awkward man she meets outside the investigation, he crafts a persona designed to disarm suspicion and earn her trust. This dual interaction, one as a faceless adversary over the phone, another as a seemingly unrelated acquaintance in person, allows him to shape her perceptions from two angles. Yet, what begins as calculated manipulation evolves into genuine affection, blurring the boundaries between strategy and sincerity. Raquel's eventual shift in allegiance is not the result of a single emotional appeal, but the cumulative effect of his patience, attentiveness, and shared ideals. Through her, the professor is forced to confront the possibility that connection, not control, might be his ultimate strength. However, this bond also exposes him to unprecedented risk, as the emotional investment compromises the detachment that has long been his shield. The relationship becomes both his greatest tactical victory and his most dangerous vulnerability, underscoring the central paradox of his character, that the qualities making him brilliant as a strategist are the same ones that make him fallible as a man. Beneath the layers of calculation and restraint, the professor carries a deep, almost romantic belief in justice, albeit a version defined on his own terms. His worldview is shaped by personal loss, systemic inequality, and a recognition that conventional paths to change often fail against entrenched power. The heists he orchestrates are more than financial crimes. They are acts of symbolic redistribution, staged to expose the hypocrisy of institutions that claim moral authority while exploiting the public. This ideological foundation fuels his patience. Years of preparation are justified if the outcome challenges the status quo. However, the moral high ground he claims is constantly threatened by the messy reality of human behavior under extreme pressure. Members of his crew do not always adhere to the nonviolent doctrine. Hostages become unpredictable variables, and the authorities resort to unethical tactics, forcing him into ethically gray decisions. In these moments, his vision teeters between revolution and survival, and he must decide whether to bend his principles for the sake of the mission. What sets him apart from archetypal masterminds is that these compromises weigh heavily on him. He is not immune to guilt or self-doubt. This moral reflexivity, his willingness to question himself even as he manipulates others, creates a rare depth in his characterization. The professor's genius lies not just in winning the game, but in ensuring that the game itself means something beyond the spoils, embedding each heist into a broader narrative of resistance. The discipline the professor exhibits is almost monastic, extending beyond mental preparation into every facet of his life. He adheres to routines that sharpen his focus, meticulous note-taking, rehearsing scenarios aloud, and running simulations of possible outcomes until they become muscle memory. His hideouts are organized with surgical precision, maps layered with annotations, color-coded timelines, and shelves stacked with research materials ranging from metallurgy to psychology. This order is not simply about operational efficiency. It is his anchor against chaos. In the fluid environment of a high-stakes heist, where human error and unforeseen events are inevitable, this baseline of structure allows him to pivot without losing his bearings. Even his interactions are choreographed, with pauses, tones, and gestures considered in advance to maximize their effect. Yet, despite this outward perfectionism, he leaves space for improvisation, a paradox that reflects his deep understanding of complexity theory, that rigid systems break under pressure, while adaptable ones survive. This balance between control and flexibility is perhaps his greatest strategic strength. It allows him to appear omniscient without being inflexible, and to respond to unfolding crises with the calm of someone who has already rehearsed disaster 1,000 times in his mind. The discipline that fuels his success is also the wall that isolates him, keeping relationships at arm's length until the heist demands, in his own heart, force those walls to crack. In the crucible of the Bank of Spain operation, the professor's strategic evolution becomes fully apparent. Unlike the Royal Mint heist, which was executed from the shadows, the second heist forces him into a more visible and combative role. The stakes are heightened, not merely money, but the life of Rio, the crew's youngest and most vulnerable member, who has been captured and tortured by the authorities. This personal catalyst transforms the mission into a rescue operation disguised as a robbery, layering urgency atop complexity. The professor adapts by integrating new tactical dimensions, political leverage through exposing government corruption, forming alliances with external actors like Palermo, and orchestrating public demonstrations that pressure law enforcement. Here, his mastery of asymmetric warfare is on full display, as he turns a small team into a force capable of destabilizing state power without matching it in numbers or firepower. Yet, the operation also pushes him to his emotional limits. The loss of Nairobi, internal dissent, and relentless countermeasures from the police threaten to fracture both the crew and his composure. For the first time, his adaptability is tested not only by the unpredictability of the enemy, but by the erosion of unity within his own ranks. Despite these challenges, he continues to navigate the chaos with the precision of a tactician who knows that the true battleground is perception, and that as long as the story remains in his control, the mission remains alive. Loss becomes an inescapable shadow over the professor's journey, shaping his decisions and deepening his complexity. The death of Berlin, his brother, co-conspirator, and in many ways his ideological counterbalance, marks a turning point that reverberates through every choice he makes in the Bank of Spain heist. Berlin's flamboyant confidence and willingness to embrace risk often contrasted with the professor's caution, yet their bond was rooted in mutual respect and shared history. Losing Berlin is not just a personal tragedy. It's the loss of a stabilizing force that balanced Sergio's meticulous planning with daring execution. This grief intertwines with guilt as he reflects on the dangerous path he set for those he recruited. The professor's sense of responsibility for his team is profound, bordering on paternal, and each injury or death within their ranks reinforces the stakes of his moral code. Yet loss does not paralyze him. It sharpens his resolve. He channels grief into focus, using it as fuel to ensure that every sacrifice has meaning. This emotional alchemy is part of his brilliance. He can feel deeply without letting emotion fully override strategy, though the cracks in his composure reveal the cost of that balance. By integrating the memory of those lost into the fabric of his plans, he transforms personal pain into collective purpose, turning tragedy into a unifying force for those still standing. The professor's handling of adversaries reflects his mastery in exploiting psychological weaknesses without unnecessary confrontation. He rarely engages in direct aggression. Instead, he dismantles opponents by making them act against their own interests. Inspectors, negotiators, and political leaders become trapped in his constructed scenarios, forced into choices that seem logical in the moment, but lead to strategic dead ends. His interaction with Colonel Tamayo during the Bank of Spain heist is a prime example. By carefully leaking information and orchestrating public unrest, he forces Tamayo into escalating responses that alienate public opinion and compromise official credibility. This ability to weaponize the opponent's pride, impatience, or fear is central to his success. It is a style of warfare rooted in Sun Tzu's philosophy, winning without fighting by controlling the conditions of battle. Yet, it's not without risk. The more he manipulates, the more unpredictable the backlash can become, especially from adversaries willing to break rules entirely. His psychological dominance is strongest when the enemy plays within expected limits. But when those limits dissolve, as with rogue elements like Gandia, he must pivot quickly, abandoning elegance for survival. These moments test not only his adaptability, but his willingness to compromise the principles that define him, proving that even the most carefully constructed mental fortress can be shaken by chaos. Perhaps the most defining aspect of the professor's character arc is the gradual erosion of his isolation. At the series' outset, he is a solitary architect, a man who exists on the periphery of the action, manipulating events from the safety of distance. His relationships are tools, his interactions calculated, and his emotions carefully locked away. But as the heists unfold, bonds with the crew and with Lisbon pull him into the heart of the conflict, both physically and emotionally. By the final chapters, he is no longer an untouchable figure behind the curtain. He is in the streets, exposed, and fighting alongside his people. This shift is not simply the result of circumstance. It reflects a fundamental change in his understanding of leadership. He comes to see that control is not absolute, and that trust in others can be as powerful as any plan. This evolution humanizes him, making him more relatable and more vulnerable, yet also strengthens his capacity to inspire loyalty. His final maneuvers in the Bank of Spain are a testament to this transformation. He wins not by rigid control alone, but by empowering his team to adapt, improvise, and take ownership of their roles. In embracing connection, he risks the very detachment that made him effective, but in doing so, he discovers a deeper form of strength, one rooted not in solitude, but in solidarity. In the end, the professor stands as a character who defies easy categorization, part strategist, part idealist, part manipulator, and part romantic. His brilliance is not solely in his plans, but in his ability to weave them into a narrative that transcends the crime itself. He turns robberies into revolutions, crew members into symbols, and setbacks into opportunities. Yet for all his genius, he is not invincible. His victories are hard-earned, his losses deeply felt, and his morality constantly tested. The tension between his intellect and his humanity drives the series, making him as unpredictable as the heists he engineers. He is a man who thrives on structure but survives through adaptability, who distrusts emotion yet is ultimately shaped by love and loyalty. The Salvador Dalí mask may hide his face, but it cannot conceal the complexity beneath. A mind forged in isolation, tempered by loss, and expanded by connection. By the close of his arc, the professor has not only outwitted the system he set out to challenge, but has also redefined himself in the process. He emerges not merely as the mastermind of a legendary heist, but as the architect of an idea, one that proves intellect can rival power, and that sometimes the greatest victories are those won without ever firing a shot. After the Royal Mint triumph, the professor and his crew vanish into carefully planned new lives. But peace shatters when Rio, hiding with Tokyo, reaches out through an unsecured line and is captured by a covert task force. Tortured in secret, his plight triggers the next mission, the Bank of Spain. The professor designs it not just as a heist, but as a political statement and a rescue. Drawing on years of research, he crafts a plan that merges tactical brilliance with symbolic warfare, melting the gold into granules for discreet extraction, flooding the vault to slow enemies, and framing the robbers as symbols of defiance. He knows that control over the media narrative will be as vital as control over the bank itself. By integrating public opinion into the operation, he expands the battlefield beyond the vault's walls. Inside, Palermo assumes Berlin's old role as on-site leader, managing a crew whose loyalty is balanced by volatile emotions. Outside, the professor maneuvers against Colonel Tamayo, predicting his moves and forcing him into reactive positions. The mission is already more than theft. It's a test of whether intellect and unity can stand against raw state power. Inside the bank, precision collides with chaos. The professor's redundancy planning, Multiple escape routes, layers of deception, contingencies for human error, keeps the operation alive when Gandia, the security chief, escapes and turns the siege into open combat. His rampage cost them Nairobi, whose death fractures morale. The professor, usually calm, channels grief into calculated retaliation, escalating the psychological war. He leaks proof of Rio's torture, igniting public protests that hem into Mayo politically. Every move is a chess play, controlling the hostage dynamic to keep police hesitation, releasing information to sway public opinion, and anticipating the state's next strike. Even personal bonds become tactical tools. Each member's loyalty is reinforced with personal stakes in the mission. The professor shapes not only events, but perceptions, scripting the police into roles that make their aggression work against them. Yet the human cost is undeniable. His doctrine of no unnecessary bloodshed is harder to uphold when enemies break every rule. Still, adaptability remains his shield, turning setbacks into pivots that keep the mission moving forward. Lisbon's capture becomes both a crisis and an opportunity. The professor engineers her rescue mid-transfer, replacing her with a decoy and flying her into the Bank of Spain itself. Her return shifts the balance inside, reinvigorating the crew's resolve. Meanwhile, Tamayo escalates to military force, but the professor anticipates this, knowing overreach will erode his opponent's credibility. He seeds disinformation, making the authorities believe they're regaining control, while secretly advancing the gold extraction. That his strategy operates like a living organism, flexible, self-correcting, able to absorb blows without losing direction. By controlling tempo and perception, he forces Tamayo into a corner. Either admit defeat or claim a hollow victory. Inside, Palermo steadies his leadership, directing the final stages of smuggling the gold piece by piece. Outside, protests swell, fueled by the imagery the professor curated from the start. The Dalí mask and red jumpsuit, now global emblems of defiance. The operation becomes more than survival. It becomes the rewriting of power itself. The endgame is a duel of illusions. The professor orchestrates a grand deception, convincing Tamayo that the state has recovered the gold, when in truth it has been swapped with gilded brass. This sleight of hand secures the crew's release while allowing the government to save face before the public. It is the perfect blend of tactical and narrative victory. The robbers leave alive, the gold is theirs, and the authorities unknowingly legitimize their escape. Losses weigh heavily. Berlin's sacrifice years before, Nairobi's death, and the scars left by constant battle. But the mission ends without the collapse of unity. The professor's genius is clearest here. He redefines victory not as annihilating the enemy, but as shaping the ending so both sides believe they've won. By embedding his win inside his opponent's pride, he ensures no one hunts them with the full force of vengeance. The crew disperses into new lives, each a ghost in the world's eyes, their legend intact. From a quiet mastermind in glasses to the architect of two of the most daring heists in history, the professor's journey is a testament to the power of intellect, patience, and vision. Across the Royal Mint and Bank of Spain, he proved that a heist could be more than theft. It could be a performance of rebellion and a mirror held up to power. He turned a handful of outlaws into symbols, weaponized public sentiment against entrenched authority, and showed that strategy can outmatch brute force. His victories were never clean. They were forged through loss, sacrifice, and constant adaptation. Yet each step was part of a larger design, to leave not only with wealth, but with an idea that would outlive them. In the end, the gold is hidden, the crew is free, and the world is left chasing ghosts. The masks remain on walls and in protests worldwide, a silent reminder of the time when a man with nothing but a plan made the system tremble. As the credits roll on their story, the audience is left not just entertained, but charged with the question of what might be possible if they dared to dream as boldly and to plan as perfectly as the professor.